with saying that there's two sure things in life, they say, death and taxes. I'm going to add a third one to that, and that's change, right? Change and progress. Change, if it's not managed correctly, leads to complexity, and we've heard a lot about complexity today. Complexity, if it's not managed correctly, leads to chaos, right? And so that's why this discussion we're about to have on standards is so important, because standards are kind of the lighthouse through the sea of change. And how do we then enable a system that is complex and chaotic to be a system that is efficient and smoothly driven? So again, I think this is going to be a very interesting discussion with these gentlemen up here today because we're going to cover kind of a broad range of standards and standardization. And we'll try to make this also as practical as for the laymen in the room that aren't working in these fields on a very daily basis as well. So I'd like to start with, and we'll go ahead and go from my right to left for an introduction. You have 2 minutes.
Hello everyone, thank you for having me. My name is Demetres Armanes. I work as a senior research engineer at the American Bureau of Shipping, but today I represent the Greek standardization body a lot as a national SME to the ISO TC8 Working Group 10, which is smart shipping, and the ISO standards we are developing there. Thank you.
Hello, Kalispera, and good morning. I'm Jose Milhazes. I'm working on GasLog as the business process and innovation management. So I'm the type of person that brings business transformation and the disruption sometimes that this business needs on some thoughts. I'm a chief engineer, and somehow in the long journey of 25 years, I became what you just saw, process and innovation management.
Hello, everybody. My name is Demetriades, and I'm the puzzle of the day because for those who have seen the program, I work in Alpha Bank, which is, has nothing to do with shipping. And also, even worse, I work in procurement of Alpha Bank, which is, completely irrelevant to our day-to-day. However, in a previous capacity, I was the CIO for Athens International Airport, and airport has 2 words, air and port. And I'm sure you can make the connection there. So we are going to talk about something that relates to ports and ships, although it will be about airplanes and airports.
Okay, I am Jaco Voorspuij. I work for GS1 now for just over 6 years, most recently in digital services, but before that in standards for transport and logistics. I have been also, and this is my prime, let's say, reason for being here today, co-chair of the International Taskforce Port Call Optimization, which I joined about 5 years ago as well, to help develop some of the standards, pretty much most of the standards that Dita was talking about before. I will show you a few more of those later on. I have experience in the industry myself, having worked with DHL for some 20 years, a significant period of which I also worked in the global forwarding part of DHL. But my main focus is end-to-end supply chain, and I would like to bring that also to the front today.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for being here. My name is Manos Papadakis. I am a working colleague of Jaco in GS1, in the Greek office of GS1 Association Greece. For 8 years now, my team works and helps companies through standards to achieve interoperability, digital innovation, and digital transformation. I'm very keen on the maritime industry. I am a holder of the Shipbroking Gnosis Certificate of the Hellenic Shipbrokers Association, so I had the opportunity, and I continuously do, to have a better input in the maritime operations, which I am very keen on.
Great. Thank you, gentlemen, for the intro. As you can see, we have some diverse, different kind of backgrounds and history up here. Of course, we're not so diverse in other ways. I would say gender and age, we're all pretty much on par. So anyways, so what we're going to do now is we're going to do kind of a 20 minutes or so of discussion. So I have 4 kind of questions for the panel here, and this is going to be kind of an interactive kind of panel discussion as well. So we kind of want to make this challenge each other if you can. No throwing things, no fighting over the plexiglass, but let's try to make this as interactive as possible. We will do the kind of hand system for those of you that want to answer the question, so it doesn't get too chaotic up here. So the first question I have for you today is, what benefits for vessels and ports do you see deriving from increasing the amount of standards currently active in the maritime industry today? Who wants to take a first crack? All right, Jaco.
Okay, well, having worked on standards, development of standards in ITPCO for 6 years, first of all, I know for a fact already that standards are being used in, for instance, port exchange. So what kind of standards do you actually start with? Well, the very basics, for instance, like terms and definitions. So, as well as describing the process. This is one of the things you can download from the Port Call Optimization Taskforce, describing the port call optimization as a process and what standards you can use for this. So this then is another leaflet or booklet you can download from the same place, describing exactly how you can implement that process using global data standards to identify things, also to make sure that you use the codifications exactly for the same things and that you don't confuse your business partners by using the same words for different objects and different identifications. This is currently one of the key problems we have whenever we discuss things in the overall supply chain, for sure, but also I think specifically in the whole maritime-based supply chains when you get to ports, the confusion is sort of, let's say, squared or even exponentially growing when you look at the complexities and the numbers of people associated with activities in a port area. So having standards to even just talk about the way that things happen in a port, then have common identifications for the things so you're not confused about what exactly it is you're communicating about on paper or electronically. That's really going to help you a lot in driving the kinds of efficiencies that Dieter already gave you. Hundreds of tons of bunker fuel saved by even the most basic applications of standards in processes.
I will agree with this statement. And recently, as an example, I will just say the response from the gentleman from the Manos shipping, who just describing the international standard used in the development of the application. He was able to communicate all these requirements, include the standards. So from me, coming from working on the autonomous shipping standardization, having just a code number to address all these different terminology requirements, technical requirements, or other requirements that technology developers or users will use eventually to do to provide their products is very important. So having more standards actually make it easier for people interested in applying the standards to communicate with each other of their compliance and eventually their interfaces and their requirements.
What we definitely see is that, and everybody before us mentioned, is that we have lots of information, lots of data, and also lots of new technologies. I cannot definitely ignore this fact, and let's say the bonding material of all these technologies and all this interoperability aspect cannot be anything else than standards, standardized ways to communicate the information between different stakeholders. For instance, in GS1, we have lots of standards as a not-for-profit body that associate with data exchange and uniquely recognize locations, shipments, consignments, and supply chain elements that are needed for vessels and ports optimization. Needless to say also that in terms of vessels and ports, we have lots of data generated within the voyages, within the overhauls or outfits in the shipyards, and especially the ones related to operations are closely related also to the most important maritime documents, be it bill of lading, be it chartered parties, be it letter of credits, that are absolutely connected within each other. So how can, in this era, without a digitalized way of identifying unambiguously information, go to the next level of digitalization in the maritime industry? That's a good question.
Let me bring a little bit of perspective of ship owning and ship management. One of the things that I think will lead for this standardization is basically the customer. We do have a lot of suppliers who've been aboard all the time as people coming to us. And what we tend to do as a process is looking and saying, what is, as a company, that we need? And what data that we need to improve our process, to stream our process, and to make the process sustainable. Okay? There's several things that is actually happening. And what I foreseen is that if a supplier on an RFP tell me that it doesn't comply with non-functional requirements on data standardization and bringing the data into my company, it's out. So this is what my contribution in the standardization. So I think we have some suppliers. I think we have some ship owners over here. It's like I said, we are the first ones to actually go to the market and say, do you have it? Do you comply it? If you don't have it, you don't have a system proof.
Let me throw a curveball then in here. I'm just thinking about if we look at the amount of standards there was 20 years ago till today, it's been quite a drastic increase, correct? Yet if we look at, let me just pull out the container ship market. Right now we're seeing reliability levels around the 30% mark, right? We're in some special times right now. But even at its peak, we're looking at 70%. So we haven't seen the gains in, and what we're talking about here is efficiency. Right? We keep seeing this, that it allows our system to become more efficient as we have increasing standards. Why do you think, and there's a lot of third-party variables here, but why do you think we're not seeing these type of gains, even though we're increasing the standardization and the levels of standardization? Jaco?
Well, I think it's the matter of perspective that is getting in the way here. So if you take a narrow perspective, it may actually be very beneficial for you, and since we could challenge each other, as you mentioned, ship owners may be very well served and be very profitable organizations if there is a huge demand, more than there is capacity, which will allow them to fully optimize what they can do. But in the process, the end-to-end flow of cargo across the maritime mode will, because of that sub-optimization on a single perspective, will suffer. It is basic, and I used to also work in manufacturing for 6 years. It is the basic 101 on sub-optimization of planning and execution within an organization even. If you do not want or are not able to take into consideration the needs of those that rely on your service, you will continue to see these kinds of, let's say, sub-optimizations, and you will ultimately not achieve the full end-to-end benefits that you can achieve if you were to apply standards and if you were to really collaborate using those standards. And I think it was already mentioned earlier today, the will to collaborate is the key to success.
Jose, you have a thought on that as well, since you kind of called out ship owners over there?
Yes, I want to have something. We all, let's just look on the small process, okay? We all have to comply with the rules and regulations, old flags, whatever, class sites and so on. And we all make in ship management that effort. We put a lot of effort. The question will be, if you will be able to maintain that or pay that effort, and that will be the profitability of your company. You will get bankrupt if you're not thinking that all the compliance will not go to a blockchain. You will go. You will continue to comply, but you will have an army of people trying to feed someone else's systems because you need to be on the game. So what I'm actually trying to say is that setting up a proper data standards, a proper data process, a proper look into the standardization that is actually happening around us. We are discussing as it never exists, but I think 20 years ago, I remember to actually see it and discuss some of these terms. But the idea is that try to prepare yourself. Look to your possible partnership with some customers, with some suppliers, that you need to have the standardization process in place. You need to have data talking with data. You need to have systems talk with systems. You need to have your ships part of a blockchain. So this is contributing a little bit of what I just hear. We as a ship owners, we will be forced to that. And the forcing will be money. So if you want to stay in this game, if you want to continue to be on ship management, you need to make your process sustainable. On the container ships, on the gas ships, whatever you actually do it. But what the main reason I'm picking up the compliance, we all need to comply.
Thinking of what you said before, Michael, it's true. The last 20 years, at least, we have an exponential development of standards in many aspects. But here, something that we see and we have to take into consideration is that in order to implement standards, especially in the digitalized era and what we are discussing today, you need the people, and shout out to our seafarers and all the people in the maritime industry, to engage in this concept. So here we can bring something that we have encountered as well as GS1. We have 2 million companies that are using GS1 standards, and we are training them how to engage and all this stuff. And we see it. We have an element of, let's say, digital illiteracy. And this means that if you cannot understand the technology, how you can understand the standard and use it? So from this perspective, I think that there must be a concept of synergies and collaboration. This is the ultimate concept in order to implement standards. And through this, and good training of people and better understanding in simple manners, the concept of standards, this could be definitely the key aspect of success.
Okay. Yeah. I will try to answer this question from the technical standards approach, because there may be different standards for operations, different standards for other IT elements from the engineering part. And specifically for digital engineering and networks, the easy question is that technology is advancing far faster than what the standardization process can match. So we have seen a lot of standards, from the technical side on these regards, from the electronics perspective or the communication perspective, to come out, published, and the technology is already ahead of them. So until we reach to a point where an emerging de facto standard will start, to materialize, and we see, the bridge communications where the NMEA protocol has been, same for the past 10, 20 years. Since we have seen that kind of, de facto standardization to appear, then we will be able to, create these standards that people will actually take and use, and from next version. So the question is about, the period of development between technology and international standardization, from my end.
Great, thank you. We're going to move on to the next question now. I'm losing my voice. So looking at other industries, right? So outside of maritime, what can we learn from their standards journey that could actually benefit our industry in the maritime? I'd like to ask, George, to start off with this.
I think this is my time, yeah?
Absolutely.
And I cannot tell you about standards in maritime, okay? Well, what I can tell you is that I will not talk about banks, but I will give you an acronym, CDM, Collaborative Decision Making, which in the aviation industry is called ACDM, Airport Collaborative Decision Making. And what I can tell you is that this has been a project that has been running since around about 2003. And practically speaking, the first CDM airports in Europe, they appeared in 2015 or 16. So that makes a good 13 years of work and standardization in order to be able to have the first instance. And what does this thing do? It's a very simple in conception thing, but you can all consider the analogy with the maritime world. Yeah? An airport is like a port. Yeah? You get airplanes the same way the port gets boats. Airplanes are like boats, okay, different sizes and different speeds, but nevertheless they do the same work, okay? They carry things and they carry people. They need to dock somewhere, they need to leave from somewhere, okay? What happens in an airport? You have ground handlers. The same way you have in a port, you have all the people that work, you know, in the companies that do the fueling and everything. And what you also do, you have a port operator and you have an airport operator, yeah? And finally, you have the authorities, which in the case of the airport is the tower. Okay, in the case of the port is the port police and the port authority and so forth. So what does ACDM do? Actually, it has four fundamental pillars. The first one is called information sharing. Sorry, I'm getting old, so I have a note, yeah, but yeah. When I started this, it was about 20 years ago. So first thing is information sharing. The second one is called turnaround process. The third one is variable taxi time, and the fourth one is pre-departure sequence. Now, if you take the concepts themselves, I'm sure you can find the relevance in the maritime world, yeah? Because information sharing, you have all discussed about information sharing, how, you know, a port can exchange information with the ships that come in order to make sure, you know, that they are on time and so forth, okay? Here you have multiple stakeholders. You have everybody chipping in their own information. Why? Because this information goes on to the turnaround time. What is the turnaround time for an airplane? Is the time that it takes it from the minute it lands until the minute it takes off again. And every company tries to do this as fast as possible. You know, I mean, I think that for Europe, the champion is either EasyJet or Ryanair, because they do it in less than 20 minutes. Now think of this, yeah? 20 minutes. Plane lands, empties, gets cleaned, refuels, gets full, gets baggage, takes off. 20 minutes. There's no way you can imagine this happening, but it does happen. Why it happens? Because everybody is orchestrated to go in at the right time. Why they are orchestrated? Because they work under a CDM platform. So everybody knows when is the time to chip in, when is the time to go in. And if something comes in, you know, the information flies into the platform, and everybody gets notified, so they reallocate the resources wherever they can. And that's how CDM airports are not first in, first out. It's first in, first ready out. So whoever is first goes. Now, how important is this? I can tell you. Athens International Airport has the capacity, or does in the summertime, when we have no pandemic, etc., it does about 55 movements per hour. So that's more or less one movement per minute, yeah? So one takeoff or one landing. Under a CDM platform, it could go up to 90. So that's a movement in, you know, there is more movements in a minute, yeah, in a single minute. So that itself shows what are the benefits for the airlines, what are the benefits for the airport, and what are the benefits of the optimization because of everything that runs smoothly. And all these things come through a CDM platform. I'm sure you can find the analogy with Maritime because it's exactly the same principle. Multi-stakeholders, they all chip in information. You find the key events that get affected by this information. You disseminate this, and everybody works with a target to achieve specific milestones. So this is my piece. I'm not going to tell you about the crisis. I'm not going to tell you about lending in banking. And thank you very much for the time you allocated for me.
But they can ask you at lunch.
Well,
We really want to know about banking.
Yeah, free credit cards.
Yeah, there you go. Jaco?
Yeah, I fully support what my colleague here on the right-hand side is saying. Port call optimization and the process described there is really a blueprint for collaborative decision-making in ports. So totally agree with all of his statements. To get that process actually running and running well, I would like to draw our perspective to a slightly different aspect. And I also want to try draw the attention to another highly competitive environment. which for the last 50 years, despite it being a very, very large community with huge revenues going through it, has managed to standardize on a single global data standard for identification. In case you haven't guessed it, it's the retail sector, and they have standardized on first the EAN code, the UPC, now all called the Global Trade Item Number. But according to Shakespeare, a rose is still a rose by any other name and just as beautiful. So the key point I'm trying to make here is unless we start also looking into the identification of everything that you need to identify for that process to work, and let's face it, on airports to a large extent, that has been done. But in ports and port facilities and the fairways into ports, all of this stuff to a large extent still does not exist. But unfortunately, in the port call optimization efforts, the Port Information Manual has actually now delivered those standards. And now I have to step out a little bit of my PCO role as a GS1 person, together with participants in PCO, among them Port of Rotterdam. We are now looking to build on standards to develop services that can allow you to identify any location in any supply chain anywhere in the world, go to that one place, find that location, and then be able to connect to whomever needs more information about that location and then actually make that connection. So in principle, the foundation for every single, let's say, piece of alignment that's needed for CDM, where things need to happen, that part you can now actually start to do anytime soon based on global data standards.
If I can comment on that, I absolutely agree with Jaco's statement, and what I would like to bring into the attention, especially for the maritime industry, a highly silo-based, as they call industry, is multimodality. It's a concept that in GS1 we have it in mind in every standard that we are developing, but it will be, and it must be, if I can say so, the drive in order to generate, to create and agree new standards. This is something that we see a lot. For instance, our organization is participating in a project. It's called Phoenix Network. It will digitalize the European supply chain. And we see there this lack of having a common understanding of standards. So how can you create new standards, multimodal ones, as soon as you do not have in mind this need, that I will take cargo from location A, this location might be an industry, I will distribute it to a port. In the port, there will be the port processes and operations that will load it in the cargo vessel, and it will be then discharged in a port of destination and then get to the final recipient. So this multimodality concept, I think, that will be the drive for new standards to be developed in the industry, let alone, and here we can mark, for instance, standards that our organization has developed, let alone events tracking data. So I think that multimodality is the key enabler for new standards in the sector.
Jose has a point.
As an innovation manager, I've been, and one of the key points, one of the things I do, I try to benchmark our own process and shipping with external companies. Other companies like IKEA, like Tyson, I'm continuous on the discussion on that group, what they're actually doing. And sometimes I get challenged, I say, this is too much. But there's other things that, for example, I just question you. What is important of the ports or the arrival on the ports with service providers? And when I'm saying service providers, could be even maintenance providers. And we do have some cases, I do have some cases that we have external maintenance providers getting data from us. Based on the data, they take their own decision to assist or not to assist the ship. That is another thing. The other thing is, and just putting in a new perspective, is how much we need to get out from this box. Is And I see some software providers like IB, Jean-Pierre, that I know for years, and Panos. Why I still have a PMS on the ship? This is a very interesting question, and because I don't think that I need. Tyson have thousands and thousands of elevators all around the world. They have one single PMS, Centralized, and it just trigger what locally someone need to do it to maintain that piece of equipment that talks. So this is our stream that we can go. And we look into the ships. Let's look to the ships. Why I'm still having the PMS on the ships?
Good. We'll run out of time, so let's go to the next question then. Let's focus on technology here. So if we look forward in time, all right, what new standards are needed for this new kind of, for the technology and the progress that we're seeing, which is rather exponential these days? So kind of what is not on our radar today that should be from a standardization standpoint?
Yeah, I think we need to split that question two ways. So we have new technologies that, by the necessity of the new technology, really requires new stuff. But there is, in my view, the other side of the question. If you develop new technology, you should, in my view again, always make sure that if there are already good standards available, that you actually build on those good standards. There is no reason to reinvent the wheel. So if you just start, and I really like that PXP have actually done exactly that. They've taken the results from the Protocol Optimization Task Force and said, all of that stuff that was put together is perfectly sound basis to start building a good, commercially viable software solution that anybody else can also use. That is technology using standards the right way. And maybe if you have more technical, electronics or whatever kinds of standards, you may need to amend anything there. But again, I would very much wonder whether or not there's not already standards for most of the things you think are new out there. So first of all, look before you start to invent something new in terms of standards, not in terms of the technology itself. If you think it's good, go for it.
Yep. Jose, you raised your hand.
And I will put in, I thought that Jaco will actually address that. But I also split in several stages. I think one of the most blockage that we have on this business is the longevity of the asset. Okay, so we tend to make a ship, to build a ship, and we tend to rebuild the ship over the years, and that is very costly. Okay, so whatever I have in a ship that is 20 years old, they're probably not set and equipped with leverage of equipments that can talk, that can actually bring a lot. At the same time, we also fit the ships with the new technologies that can actually do that. So what I want to start to address is to look the way that we actually talk with the equipment makers and the shipbuilders. And this is what I'm trying to bring it, is the ship is not anymore an asset to get delivered and end of discussion. We're trying to set and say, what is the correct or the right partnership that we need to have? A company that actually proves a concept, that can live and will live for the next ship life, that will be able to continuously upgrade it, not just in hardware, but also in software, in maintaining the equipment that actually exists. And I will go and put the question also to my colleague. On the aviation, they are already doing that. So the plan is not anymore the plane that gets recycled is not anymore the plane that gets built. On ships, we're still trying to maintain the asset as untouchable as we can. And then that ship, it doesn't fit anymore the technology that we need. And that is the main block that I think we have on this business.
Demetriades, since you're working on kind of the autonomous ship program, since you're also with ABS, what are your thoughts on this?
I will try to answer your question on what needs to be standardized on what standards needs to be adopted. Because we're doing some very interesting work, and I think to Jaco note, we're updating some very well-known standards. So for those in the room that you are not aware of, there are some good developments for the asynchronous ship-to-shore data communications. So for satellite operators and service providers out there, be aware that we're trying to actually go down to that kind of standardization at ISO. Also, we have the data servers on board to share field data. This is an ongoing ISO standard project, so we're updating that. And the last but not least, the one that the Smart Maritime Network actually embraced last year, and I think there is supported by major vendors, is the ISO 19848, which is the standard for data for onboard systems. So even if the cables or the electrical levels or the interfaces may not be standardized, the semantics and the way we interpret the data from onboard systems are being updated. And I mean, you can also participate through this update through a lot, and you can provide your comments on that standard. So I believe this is the most paramount one throughout the industry, and are fully supporting that standard for being adopted. Thank you.
I think that there are two aspects in this subject. First of all, as Jaco said, we have lots of standards. So there are many standards. Do we use them? Do we apply them in our processes? Then there are many standards in different sectors, be it shipbuilding, be it data exchange, be it operational standards. So perhaps we could propose a new, let's say, concept of starting to consolidating these standards. What does that mean? Searching the market, what it is available now. We have the operations, we have structured operations in the maritime industry. We can consolidate the standards that are used for each sector, and then we can check with the companies, and this is how they may embrace standardization. At what extent, if they use standards, they are using it. For instance, many times in trainings, for instance, for EDI standards, we see that companies use the invoice EDI exchange standard, but they are not aware of the dispatch advice, which for multimodal operations is something important. So I think that there are two certain steps that might be taken. And of course, above all, we have to have in mind what the concept of this conference is, the digitalization, and that things change. That in the past, many times in the maritime industry, people say that in order to do business, my word is my bond. No, ladies and gentlemen, now your data is your bond, and this is why we have to focus on this development and consolidation of even existing standards.
Well, thank you for that. We're running out of time here, so we have 10 minutes left or less. So I'd like to open up the floor for questions now. Do we have any questions from the audience? Rob Scott.
This is X, so people online can hear you also.
Thank you. 3-4 years ago, there was a lot of discussion about blockchain. Does that affect standards? What is your view? Is this going to happen, not going to happen, and does that have an impact on the standardization?
Jose raised his hand first.
Panos, I will have some discussions that I had actually in Rotterdam, in Netherlands, that we were discussing on the shipping industry, where the blockchain will be applied first and how the things will actually go. There was mainly a consensus that probably the first blockchain, as we speak, getting built, will be for oil majors. So you see a lot of initiatives showing up. The idea that they have is that they don't want to vet the ship, that is a very costly process. They want to continuously monitoring what they actually need: certification, compliance, ports, crew compliance, and so on. So blockchain definitely will come. because it's the only way that mainly for some of our customers, the process will become sustainable. So we need to drop the cost, and to drop the cost is to automate this information sharing. And of course, customers, they are the ones that pay us. So whatever they say, we will need to comply.
Well, not much about Maritime itself, but really speaking, if you look at the world, the only one that I know of, successful large-scale blockchain implementation, is in the Emirates, where they use it for supply chain finance. Yeah, there is nowhere else something which is tangible and gives money back to the investor in terms of blockchain. So I think it, given the fact that, the Emirates had the ability, both financially and time-wise, in order to develop this, nevertheless, this never got, outside the small world of the Arab Peninsula. I think it will take us some time in order to be able to explore. The potential is there in terms of security. The potential is there in terms of regulations. Obviously, when you talk about the maritime industry, where you have contracts that, you need the ship to go here, there, get loaded this, unload that, etc. Obviously, the solution of a smart contract is the optimum, is yet to be proven. And my personal estimate, given the time that has come, that has gone through since the inception of blockchain until today, and the amount of developments that has happened, which is disproportionate, to the lower end disproportionate, I think it will take some time yet, for blockchain to become commercially viable and a solution for any type of industry.
Jaco.
Yeah, well, I believe, like the previous speakers, that blockchain will have a role to play going forward, but it will be a tool in the tool set. It will not be the only tool that you would use, that's first thing. 2 years ago at the FIATA World Congress in Kuala Lumpur, I did a presentation actually also on blockchain and standards, and I think the simple one-liner from that for today is that blockchains actually work a lot better, or any distributed ledger technology for that matter, work a lot better if you apply identification standards such as what we've been discussing before around the product, around locations, around organizations, around any of those things that you want to store information in the blockchain about. You have to make sure that the identifications are unambiguous and that data associated with those numbers and codes, that they are also validated and verifiable.
Great.
If I can comment on that from an academic point of view, since I have focused on the subject, a huge issue with the blockchain adoption is quite frankly the fact that no one understands which are the benefits. I mean that what will be the profit from applying it? First and foremost, what we have to remember is that something that Oracle, the large organization, IT organization, says that blockchain remembers. So, in fact, it's a tool, as Jaco said, in order to verify unambiguously in a consensus-based way that what you say is what actually has happened in a maritime operation. So for sure, standardization will be again the element that will bring together different systems and different companies, but it needs to start step by step, to move forward step by step. I mean that if there are not successful pilots that can showcase the profits of doing that, then standards will not assist in anything. You have to prove that this works. Happily, one good thing is that, again, multimodality for GS1 is that we have many different sectors that are focusing on the subject. So again, it might be worthwhile to bring the collaboration aspect in the table. I continuously repeat it, but it is GS1's philosophy. And standards will be there, if mapped as well, to assist in broader adoption of the blockchain technology.
Great. Well, unfortunately, ladies and gentlemen, we are out of time because it is lunchtime, actually. So let's give a round of applause to our panelists today.